coffee, then I'll go. Thought that I'd just drop by and let you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. I brought the money like the lawyer said to do. It won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Welcome back to the channel, Grand Columbia. Welcome to Coffee Time Live Special Edition. Or something. Today, I'm going to talk about the election, what happened, why I was so wrong. Maybe not so wrong, but definitely got it wrong. We're going to talk about his platform, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about him and then what it means to me or us, depending. So that's my plan. Still got this dry throat. Doesn't seem to want to go away. All right, first of all, in case you hadn't heard, Petro won. It's his third time running, third time's a charm. He won. It's interesting, he won in 13 different departments. Hernandez won in 13 different departments. The coffee region voted for Hernandez. But, Hernandez, you might find this interesting. It's a little quirk about Colombian law. The runner-up is automatically appointed a seat to the Senate. So Hernandez will be senator. Thought that was kind of interesting. So let me show you the map of who won where. Purple was Petro. And essentially, it's all the poor areas, the areas of the FARC. Let's see, we got FARC in this area, and then how can I do this? Up in this area, there's a fair amount of FARC, but there's also a lot of poor in this entire strip, and there's a ton of poor up in this area. And that's who, basically that's the choir he was preaching to. But the reason he won is, aside from the turnout, he had a massive turnout. Most votes in the history of Colombia. I know that sounds familiar, but I think the elections here are pretty legit. They don't use computers. It's all done by card and a sealed box system, and they're accompanied. Every voting place has the national police and local police. They're all there's no claims here by any party that it's an illegitimate vote, and I tend to think that's probably the case. But Bogota is a massive population. It's a fifth of the Colombian population, and that's his biggest support group, and he had big turnout. Typically, younger people are the ones that don't go and vote, and yesterday apparently they did. So that's what we got. The vote difference, well, you had 500,000 people that went to vote, and when they got their card, they decided neither one. non-votes or whatever you want to call it. They took the time to go to the poll. There were 500,000 of those, but the vote difference, even if Hernandez got every single one of those, the vote difference was 700,000. See if this holds up. So let me turn that off. See, Bernal. Good morning. Good morning. It's a good morning. Well, we'll see. Juka, how you doing? How you doing? George, getting your popcorn now. Send me some. Maybe a little salt in the throat. That's what I should do. I should gargle with some salt water. It's not until I start talking. And because I'm alone most of the time, you know, I'm not talking. It seems fine. Then I get on here and it just goes to hell. Or maybe I just not getting enough exercise talking and it's not used to it. His platform. Well, I'll get you some highlights here, and then I'll go over a list. First of all, he wants to reduce oil exploration, or actually wants to end oil exploration in Colombia. He wants to stop oil and refineries, essentially. Colombia is self-sufficient. It's why we run $2.30 or 40 cents a gallon for gas. And he wants that to go away in favor of green energy. He wants to increase the tax on the upper 4,000 people in Colombia. Specific and targeted. Nothing political there. And with that, he wants to pay for a program that's going to cost about 130 trillion pesos. Problem is, the upper 4,000 with the tax he's proposing is only going to amount to half of that, about 60 trillion. But what he wants to do with that, just a quick rundown here, is he wants a cash handout to seniors of 500,000 pesos. He wants a cash handout to vulnerable mothers of 500,000 pesos. He wants a program to, this actually kind of maybe makes sense as a public works, a subsidy for water issues. There are some areas in Colombia where it's a problem, and that will cost 8 trillion pesos. Well, I'll try to refrain from commenting right now. Public employment for the unemployed, and that'll be 58 trillion pesos. He also wants to impose a whole series of new import taxes on products coming into Colombia. A lot of similarities to Correa in Ecuador when he was in power. So his platform, green energy over oil and gas. He wants to, this is very vague, but he wants to decrease economic inequality. He's a climate change proponent. He wants Duque to stand trial for his involvement in the 2021 protests or riots, which is really ironic, and I'll get to that later. He wants to create a minister of equality. Please, don't throw up till this video is over. He wants to restore agriculture to the people by ending narco use of land for cocaine. Now, how does he want to do that? He proposes that they end cocaine and grow marijuana, which has become legal throughout the world in many places. So he wants to be a supplier of marijuana. That's not such a horrible idea, but he wants to develop rail in Colombia. There's a reason they don't have rail now, so I don't know. Good luck with that. He wants to increase funds for public education and research. He wants to, this one kills me. he wants to reform the private health system, the system that provides for everyone, even with people with no money. There's a provision for them to go to clinics and be taken care of. And it's a system that runs in the black. But he wants to reform it, which means he wants to turn it from a private to a public system. That's kind of a nightmare. So that's one that one really bothers me. He wants to declare an economic emergency, economic state of emergency for widespread hunger. There's some legitimacy in that. COVID really devastated some areas of Colombia. Although I will say that on the world stage, Colombia is one of the fastest growing economies post-COVID of any country, faster than the US, faster than any country in Europe. And I've seen it here, the changes for the positive. Problem is, it can't be fast enough for a lot of areas, that particularly areas that struggled even before COVID. So he wants to establish a special rights category for LGBTQXYZ. He wants to reinstate relationships with Venezuela. He wants to end extraditions to the United States, particularly over narcos. And he wants to, in general, move away from the US as a partner, and is more interested in being neutral, we'll say, at least for now. Which there's a lot of things in his list that the vast majority of people in Colombia are not fans of. But, well, let me get to my next thing here. And I'll go over your comments as soon as I'm done with this. How did he win? There's some theories on that, so I'm going to throw them out to you. And there's the first two here. I personally don't think it had any real effect. The age of Hernandez. He's 77 years old. Now, I've heard this from a number of people. But you have to understand, I live in a bubble. I live in the coffee region. Colombia is a widespread, diverse area. And what occurs here doesn't occur elsewhere. So, but what I heard more than what I heard a number of times, is that there's a fear of his age, even though he's been a very good politician. He overwhelmingly won in the areas that he's governed. But people around the world have been watching clips of Biden. And they're sensing it as before their eyes, even though it was before he was elected. They're sensing that before his eyes, he's just fallen apart. That he's become senile while president. That's it tends to be a world view. And there's this idea that at the last minute, because Hernandez was up a few days ago in the polls and had been for a while, with a couple exceptions. But there's this theory that people at the last minute got cold feet, thinking they'll get him into office and then he's just going to go loopy and they're going to end up with a national disgrace. I don't think that's the case. I think there's probably some people, I mean, because I didn't come up with that theory, it was posed to me by Colombians, but I don't think that's it. Theory number two. The riots of 2021 were traumatic for Colombia. They were particularly bad. And The theory is that there's such a fear of the riots occurring because if Petro had lost, he actually promoted those riots, and if he lost, that those riots would come back and that there would be retaliation. There would just be huge problems, and so that caused some people to be afraid and to vote for Petro simply because pretty much known here, and I mentioned in my video yesterday that if Petro won, there would just be images of celebration, but if he lost, it would try to portray it as the country was up in arms. And so there's that theory. I like I say, I don't think that's it. I personally think it just it's pretty nuts and bolts. It's when you take a people over a 2-year period, a very short period where you're not going to forget anything, and you take away their jobs and you lock them in their house, and your prices go up because all your local places go out of business and there's nothing but the big chains who can command what prices they want. Granted, inflation hasn't been bad here, but if you're poor and you're living on pennies to the dollar, it's tough. And I think if you go to these places that were poor before, because you had 27% of the population pre-COVID that was in poverty, which is not a horrible figure on the national stage. It's actually pretty close to what the US runs. But you run that up to almost 40% over such a short period of time. I think, personally, I think that's why you had a turnout. I think everybody that was out there that lost their job has been suffering and is just angry at the establishment who just comes across as not caring. I think you're just voting to blow things up. And that's my theory. Now, I'll quickly talk about Petro, then I'm going to get to these, and I'll give you my opinion. Who is Petro? Well, he's a lifelong activist. He's a terrorist and a politician. I found this interesting. Correa, the left-wing socialist that turned out after his 8 years, discovered how corrupt he is, and if he ever sets foot in Ecuador, he'll live in prison. But he was an economic major, did some graduate work in Belgium, actually married his wife, she's from Belgium, and he's currently living in Belgium. And then you got Petro, who was an economic major, who went to his graduate schooling in Belgium. So, the land of the globalist. I just thought it was kind of coincidence, maybe. Okay, off topic. In 2021, he actively and publicly encouraged the riots. He actively and publicly encouraged the riots. He blamed Duque for a lot of things to stir people up. It was very anti-government. And that's why I find it kind of pretty twisted that he wants to create a commission to go after Duque for his involvements in the riots when Petro and his cohorts had very much to do with those riots. But, he's in power now, so we'll see. He's not a king. He doesn't get carte blanche. He's got to convince an assembly and the Senate to get things done. But his first year, very possible. In 2013, while he was mayor in Bogota, there was a recall. They got hundreds of thousands of signatures on a recall, and he was recalled. He lost the recall, and as a result, they removed him as mayor, and they put a sanction on him that he could not run in Colombian politics for 15 years. This went in front of the president of Colombia, who affirmed it. So he was out as mayor, can't go for another 15 years. A year later, 2014, part of the Organization of American States, there's an Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. It's a commission within the Organization of American States, which people sign on to, countries in South America sign on to abide by certain rules that come out of it. Well, this commission said that the claims of mismanagement and placing illegal decrees in order to push a waste management project that he personally profited from, they said that it was contrived, and they ordered his reinstatement. So in 2014, the president at the time, Santos, said, okay, and reinstated him as mayor, where he finished his term. So there's that. Did I go over? Yeah, I did. Okay. Those are all the boring cliff notes, the highlights of the election, the platform, and the man. You know, I'm not a fan of his. You know, he's wielded a lot of behind the scenes power. I mean, when he did the massacre in Bogota and those 100 and some people were slaughtered, and you know, he was leading the charge on that. And he did go to prison, but he went to prison for a very short period of time. And that's because those charges, I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but those charges were reduced to illegal ownership of a gun, of firearms, which you can legally own, but they have restrictions. And that's what he was convicted on. That's really why he served such a short period of time. But that shows you that behind the scenes, there's a lot of, throughout South America, there's a lot of left-leaning power. And even those Organization of American States back in those days in that commission were very leftist, which is, you know, has a lot to do with that outcome. So, you know, Colombia's always had this struggle, but this is the first actual left president ever elected in Colombia. And I got mixed feelings. People asked me before, if he wins, are you going to leave? And I said, no, and of course I'm not going to leave. It would have to be something really bad, and he's not going to be president forever. Plus, he's got hurdles in order to accomplish a lot of these things. Now, we've seen in other countries what kind of damage a president with bad ideas can do in a short period of time. And I think that's probably going to happen. But I don't know if it's possible that he could upturn the health system in such a short period of time, for example. I certainly hope not, because they have one of the best functioning health systems in the world. Why on earth would you reform it? And why would you reform it to a system that is proven to fail everywhere? It just kind of boggles my mind. How this will affect me and expats in general. Well, the tariff on goods coming in is not good news. I hated it when it was in Ecuador and I was living there, when I'm facing 400% markup on things. It made some things just not affordable. It's quite a bit different here in that Colombia is so self-sufficient. They make most everything that you would want. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's going to have a huge effect. I find that I don't buy much outside of Colombia anyway. But on the positive side, I think this is going to have a boon for expats in the peso, because this guy, he actually believes in a weakened peso, because as a weakened peso, your country becomes much more competitive. It's easier to get jobs. It's easier to do exports because of the lower prices comparatively. And as we all know, a peso that's weak means the dollar is going to be stronger, which means our money grows. However, that's mitigated by a population, depending on how this goes, that instead of seeing the positive reforms that they're expecting, see things get worse. What Colombians, for the most part, don't seem to realize is that Colombia has been a pretty damn good economic powerhouse. I mean, its rate of growth over the last 20 years has been about 2.5 or better GDP increase every year. And that rate of poverty, which I said was at 27%, but 20 years ago, it was over 50%. Colombia has just been constantly moving up. And after COVID, as I mentioned, it's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. There's a lot of things in place that are very positive, but if you lost your job and you're poor and you're struggling and you're seeing some prices go up, none of that matters. You know, you care about where am I going to get my food tomorrow? And so you have, 39% is a significant part of the population and motivated to turn out. So we've got that to contend with. We already have issues of growing crime throughout Colombia. There's been an interesting thing right here in Quindío that's happened. Now, you know that the mayor of Quindío, because I've said this, he's had this all-out war on criminals, and every day they're taking somebody down for something. And he put in 100 new police, and it's kind of like the Untouchables, Elliot Ness. I mean, they're really making moves here. Well, that's good for Armenia. But what's happened is that we're seeing the crime increase in Calarca, in Quimbaya, in Circassia, in La Tabaida, and the towns nearby, where these criminals, okay, we can't really operate here, and so they're just kind of relocating. And that's not really a good thing. They're going to have to do this Quindío wide. So there's definitely issues. You have issues of the ELN gaining power on the Venezuelan border. You have issues of FARC. They're still kind of discombobulated, but they're reconstituting themselves to a certain extent. And the narcos have grown, particularly, out of Mexico. There's a ton of money behind them, billions and billions of dollars, and that equals, payoffs, old-timey payoffs. And that's why you saw those results. Those are also narco areas. So Colombia's got some real issues. And this last president, Duque, well, he's of a political party that I could agree with in many ways. They're, basically a conservative party. But Duque, he pretty much sucked. He didn't suck in that all the propaganda against him about all his corruption. He sucked because he was feckless. He was a coward. He didn't dare act because somebody might come out and criticize him. He didn't want to be. He didn't like being called names, I guess. Consequently, a lot of these things went on and grew. Now, he could have stepped in and stomped on FARC and ELN when he went to visit, in an area that's held by the ELN, this helicopter was shot at. If this were 20 years ago, that president would have called in the military and gone through and exterminated them. But this guy just turned tail and ran and did nothing about it. And so that, you know, that kind of emboldens things. So this last president, you know, I think has not been good to Colombia. And he also just fell in lockstep with the World Health Organization on all the COVID things. They let up towards the end because people were fed up. But for a good part of the 2 years, I mean, we had what, 7 months of lockdown when this thing began. It was crazy. So, you know, they just kind of hook, line, and sinker went for everything. And you know, we're seeing now that all those jobs lost and businesses that went out were mostly mom and pops, and they shouldn't have. So that's my feeling. I've got to kind of a wait and see. There are some positive things that could come out of this. You know, I certainly will hope so. I'll console myself with the, you know, the stronger dollar, I guess. But I don't know. We'll just have to see. So I'm going to go through these notes here. Chad, good morning. Just returned stateside. Undisclosed location in Europe. Time to see the disappointing elections. Yeah, I'm disappointed too. But we shall see. Top exports of Colombia: crude petroleum, coal, coffee, gold, refined petroleum, mostly to the U.S., then to the U.S., China, Ecuador, and Panama. Yeah, I mean, he's talking about canceling where a lot of money comes from. It's crazy. Libby, how you doing, Libby? Good morning. It's very important info many of us waited for. I'm back in Cuenca now. Yeah, Cuenca's a mess. Ecuador is a mess. I am so glad I'm not living there. They've been having riots, roadblocks, all kinds of craziness going on. And I don't see it. It's like there's no end to it. So that kind of sucks. You know, when I was living in Ecuador, I waited until the 2018 election was over because Petro ran. And had he won, I was planning not to come here. I've done a lot more research on him, but it doesn't change. If I had known then as much as I know now, I still would not have come. But I'm here, I'm living here, I'm established here. So I'm going to do a wait and see. I'm not going to, it would be silly for me to, well, if he wins, I'm just going to leave the country. I have a lot of faith in the Colombian people in general. So we'll see what happens. Another reason it's good to have an American passport. If you end up in a place, let's say worse happened and it fell apart and it became another Venezuelan. Having a U.S. passport is the easiest way to get out of a bad country. Did avoiding debates hurt him? It's possible. He didn't want to do debates. He was a TikTok candidate. Here's a 77-year-old guy, and he was on TikTok every day. And so that actually helped him. And it's hard to say that he messed this up because he came out of the woodwork basically in May, threw his hat in a ring, and did a steady climb from day one to zero to within a couple percent of winning the presidency. And he was on a constant climb, pretty steep curve until about 10 days ago. And it kind of stopped and started falling off. Now, I'm not exactly sure why. A lot of A lot of money went into advertisements, and as you can imagine, there's a fair amount of negative ads, and so I don't really know. I'm a little shook on my predictions. I really didn't expect people to turn out. They weren't turning out in the May vote anywhere near like this. I just didn't see it. But then some people said Petro was going to win, but nobody thought there would be the turnout there has been. You know, over 1 million people than ever before. What percentage of the population voted? I think is almost 60%. I saw it, I had it, but I was already bogged down with so much detail. Oh, there you go, Juka. Thank you. 58%. Yeah, I thought it was somewhere around there. I believe France has the #1 rated healthcare system in the world, and they are not private, but a government-run system. Well, if you say so. Colombia is rated, what, 3rd, I think? No, they're certainly up there, and it's private. But the thing is, it pays for itself. Even if that's true in France, and it could be, the taxpayers paying for that system. Here, system pays for itself and provides for everyone. If you don't have 2 cents in your pocket, you go to the hospital, the clinic, or whatever, you're going to get taken care of, and you're not going to have a bill. I don't know how much better you can get than that. When you have co-pays that amount to like $1, or including medicines that are already almost free, and I get prescriptions. It's crazy how cheap they are. Things in the U.S. you pay $50 to $100 for, you can pick up here for $5 or $6, made in Colombia. So I don't know. I just think if you have a system that's doing that well, don't mess with it. Don't mess with it. Legalize all drugs and then you take away the money from narcos. Well, that's not true. It's not true. I'm going to give you an example. The same arguments used for prostitution. If you have prostitution legalized, you will no longer have pimps, and you'll no longer have women that are enslaved. It'll just be women on their own making an adult decision. Couldn't be further from the truth. Colombia has legal prostitution, as does many places in this world, and you still find guys coming in and strong-arming women, kidnapping them, selling them. Didn't work. And you have similar situations with drugs. Here in Armenia, one of the problems with drugs is small use marijuana, which is legal. Yet, if gangs can get together and make that their commodity and use crime and force and coercion to promote their product, I mean, it could be milk, but drugs is what they choose. So that legalized marijuana doesn't stop those gangs from selling it and moving out now. And when you have gangs, when you have a group of people together, here it's men and women in a gang, typically it'll be anywhere from 10 to 30 people. They do their territorial thing. They have revenge hits, all the things that, if they were dealing with high-end, big expense heroin or cocaine or something. So I used to believe that for a long time. Most of my life, I believe that. I've always kind of leaned libertarian, and it's just that the truth of it, where you see these things implemented, it's not the way it works out. So I don't believe it anymore. I mean, we all believe what we want to believe. I just don't see evidence of it. We were going to move up there until this guy became president. No way are we coming there now. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. France is rated by whom? He could be right on France. I don't know. World Health Organization. All right, well, I don't know what to say there. Petro was not at the massacre of the Palace of Justice. Sorry, I gave the facts wrong. He never fired a gun. He absolutely was there. He absolutely was there. That's where he got arrested. There's video of it. I don't know where you get your information, but I've seen the video. There's also people that say, well, he wasn't part of FARC, because I said that once. Technically, he wasn't part of FARC, except he was affiliated with FARC. It was the same people. FARC didn't exist in Bogota, and so they helped fund some of this to expand their influence. So call them what you want. It was the same group of people. So no, technically he wasn't in FARC, but he was doing the work of FARC. There's also he wasn't out there doing that because he was only 17 years old and it was a mistake. No, he joined the group when he was 17, but he was in the group for a period of time. Who I would prefer a different source. Yeah, I think we've all got our faith shaken in the World Health Organization. You're right, Ecuador is a mess now. It cannot even get gas tank, no hot water. They're on strike. Yeah, it's crazy what's going on. Have there been any past cases of electoral fraud, particularly in Bogota? There's always accusations and possible. I looked to see, and I could not find anything outside of little anecdotal small things. As far as any charges by any political party that there is this big amount of fraud that would influence the election. I don't know that their system, well, every system can be broken. I think if you go to a territory where everything is controlled by, a certain ideology, and those are the people that are collecting the votes, that they can kind of figure it out. I mean, you got sealed boxes and stuff. There's probably a way around it. But then again, the people that are voting there in those areas support that anyway. So what would be the point? So I don't know. From the information that I've been able to dig up on it, I just don't see that that's an issue. Seems to me that people chose Petro because they're sick of the status quo. I agree with that. I completely agree with that. Seems as Bogota is a decider in every election. Too bad they don't have an electoral college. I definitely agree with that. That's the whole point of an electoral college. It seems to be getting a bad name in the U.S., but it was actually a brilliant idea so that you didn't have one group of wealthy people living in one area controlling millions of other people. They were both non-status quo candidates. Latin America is trending left. Well, Latin America is kind of always trended left. I mean, they'll have little spurts here and there of, you had a couple fascists jump up, and you'll have some conservatives that pop up now and then, but for the most part, Latin America or South America, sorry, tends to left ideology. And there's a lot to do with that through the Catholic religion and liberation theology. There's a lot of reasons for that. And it goes back a number of centuries. So, yeah, so there's that. But Colombia has been a beacon of steady government. a steady republic. And it hasn't changed with this guy's election. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. They have checks and balances, you know, and we'll see. People are locked down for too long, too many businesses destroyed, they wanted to change. Absolutely. That's how I see it. Did Colombia use Dominion machines to count the votes? Nope. Yes, I think that's a trend worldwide. Yeah, I would agree with that too. Portugal years ago went completely legal on all drugs. Crime went down, usage went down. Okay. I'm confused. I read Petro was literally in jail already at the date of that attack. Well, if you look, you'll find the video. And if I'm wrong, send me links and I'll come on and apologize. You know, maybe I got a hold of some propaganda or something. I tend to check, if I read something, I'll try to check it with something else. But I not only read what I said, but there was a video that took place at the time with him there. So I don't know. Well, you'll let me know, I'm sure. I have no problem if I'm wrong. I've certainly come on here. I would like to be wrong about it. I would like to be wrong about it, but we'll see. Same deal with New York City running a state's election. There needs to be an electoral college on the state. Yeah, I'm from New York, and that was always such a frustration because everybody knows New York as a Democrat state. And it's really not true. It's New York. In New York City is where all the Democrats are. And everywhere else in New York State, it's very conservative. And you'll have some candidate that will run that will overwhelmingly 70-80% lose in the state of New York, and then New York City will carry them. It's very frustrating when you live in New York because you feel like you have no vote. You feel like you have no power. It's like, what's the point? You will never be able to counter New York City. So yeah, that's a real issue. Pure democracy is actually a nightmare. Pure democracy actually amounts to mob rule. It's not a good thing. And it's why you don't have surviving pure democracies. You have to have some checks and balances in there. And the Electoral College was brilliant. Just like in Canada, I bet that fascist Trudeau was booted out. Hard to believe what went on, particularly with the truckers. How those people were vilified when those are your nuts and bolts, grassroots Canadians. You don't get any more Canadian than those people that went to Ottawa. I mean, it was crazy. If Petro wins control of the military, writing on the wall, it's left's playbook. Yeah, we could speculate a lot of things. I honestly think that Colombia is a different animal than Venezuela, for example. And because it's such a long-running, centuries-running republic, they've incorporated into the system of government these checks and balances to prevent Colombia from becoming what other countries become, like Ecuador and Venezuela. Anything can happen. You might have thought of that about the National Socialist Hitler when you might have thought that was an impossibility. So you never know. In order for him to retain his political power, he's going to have to do something that will actually improve the lot of the people that are suffering. I don't know how you do that when everything else in your platform is actually going to hurt that economy. So that, it just kind of stands to reason that popularity is going to start to fall off at some point. And if you don't have, political power behind you, if you don't have the votes behind you, then convincing other politicians, it could become a death trap for other politicians to be involved. So it's so early now. I mean, we're doing so much speculating here. I'm doing a lot of speculating here. I just, like I said earlier, I have a lot of faith in the people of Colombia and their system that they have. I don't think he can come in and he certainly can't come in and just establish that platform. So we'll see. What do you think the peso to US dollar rate could look like next year? I have no idea. None of us do. No one. It does bode well for us that he's a proponent of the weak dollar, and pretty much everything that he does will strengthen the US dollar, a weak peso I meant, and weaken the peso. And if that means it's 4,000 to the dollar, that it could go to 5, could go to 6. Who knows? If you get runaway inflation, if they try to print money, then it could, then I could become an overnight millionaire. I mean, who knows? So we'll see. As a Canadian, I'm sick and tired of the mindset that Trudeau fell from the sky. He was elected 3 times. Well, you have to admit that he was rather inert for a period of time, and it's only in the last couple of years that he's kind of gone off the deep end. So, I think next time, I think wolf in sheep's clothing, maybe he didn't have the courage to step out. Maybe what's taken place in the US in the last 2 years emboldened him. I think the COVID lockdowns gave a lot of politicians a lot of courage to be tyrannical that they didn't have before. It was kind of this experiment to exert control that succeeded for them. I don't think if he had done what he did a few elections ago, I don't think he'd be there now. But who knows? Who knows? You got your Toronto Canadians that will, they'll vote for anything. Okay. Well, we've run almost an hour. I feel uncomfortable with this live video today because there's so much speculation involved in it. I hate to shoot from the hip like that because when it really boils down to is I really don't know where this is going to go. So I'm going to hope for the best, and I hope for Colombia that he doesn't get his platform. Although there's a couple things in there that make sense to me. Of course, you're always going to have, throw him a bone. But there's a lot of things there that are tried and true failures, that we know. So I don't know. Well, that's it. That's the election in a nutshell. If I were you, I would take advantage of, the rest of this year and see how it goes. Come down. If you haven't been here, come down, visit, check it out, see what's going on. I wouldn't panic yet. I wouldn't make any decisions yet. If I were in the US, this happened, I'd probably still come. But because I was living in Ecuador and I was in a situation where I could wait things out, that's why I said what I said, and it probably wouldn't change. waiting things out is different than just never making a move. Tricky balance between socialism and capitalism. Yeah, it's always been that way, you know, here. And the thing is, you got one side that doesn't play fair, and you got the other side that doesn't play fair. Well, the capitalists, we don't see much real capitalism anymore. We see, you know, the term kind of fits, crony capitalism. It's not actual capitalism, and that's what gives it a bad name. And we never see socialism that functions anywhere, although it's a wonderful idea. But it's always the young that support it because they don't have a lot of experience in the failures of it, or in you know, man's tendencies to, you know, grasp at power and take advantage. And socialism opens that door. So you got failures on both sides. You have an utter, absolute, complete failure on the one side, and then you've got a good foundation. But if you don't have something in place to keep the big from squeezing out the small and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you end up with Pfizer Corporation that can run the world. So, you know, we need reform, and not to get biblical, but, you know, until the day that, you know, somebody from heaven comes down to take over, we're always going to have issues of man. We're always going to have our failings paraded out there. Coleman, I don't think much will change. I kind of think that's the case, at least this year. I don't think there's going to be a lot of change. He's going to run up against a lot of obstacles, but I don't know. We'll see. We're going to leave it at that. I will be here next week, Sunday, coffee time, and thankfully there'll be no politics involved. Ciao.